right, guys, here we go. We're going to get right into it today. So the first phase of the program, we're going to be talking about the inner man. And this is really, really important because if we don't get our inner man straightened out, nothing on the outside of us is going to work right. So this is sort of like your inner game, your inner being, your thoughts, your subconscious desires and inclinations. These are all things that we can affect, that we can control, and we can actually craft who we are. And so everything that happens in your outer world is a result of or is affected by your inner self. And we have a responsibility. So we need to take responsibility for what's happened in our lives by first taking responsibility for what's going on inside of us. The thing is, a lot of people can say, well, these things happen to me. My ex, she's cheating on me or whatever. My wife is cheating on me, or my ex cheated on me. So now I'm hyper vigilant. We have all these kind of excuses for our behavior. And the reality is that, we don't control what other people do. Our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors, those are the things we can control. Other than that, we can't. And so back to the serenity prayer, these are things we can control. These are things we can change. And so let's not make excuses for our behavior. Let's take responsibility for them. This program is about taking action, and this program is about dealing with the shit in your life. And so we're going to call that out. I'm your coach. I'm not your best friend. So take responsibility for what's happened in your lives and take responsibility for what's going on inside you. Now, that said, what's going on inside you might be is likely a result of, childhood trauma, family of origin issues, all kinds of past things that maybe you didn't fully control. But what you can do is you can deal with that stuff now. You can take responsibility now, and you can make a pivot now. And so that's what we're going to be dealing with in our inner game. So for the scripture side of things on this one, there's some foundational scriptures for this. Matthew 5:18 talks about, what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart, and this defiles a person. Along the lines of that, Mark 7:15 says, there's nothing outside a person that's going to make him be defiled, but the things that come out of him are what defile him. So talking about our inner game, Matthew 12:34 says, how can you speak good when you're evil? Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so how can we show up in the world and say things and be phony people to our families, to our wives, to our loved ones, when the real change hasn't happened inside? And I want to be really clear with you that women pick up things like the flare of your nostrils, a slightest wrinkle in your skin. There's chemicals, pheromones that you give off when you're stressed, when you're angry, that she can sense. And there is a plethora of nonverbal communication that happens between two people, and women and men particularly have a way of picking up on what's going on with each other. And as you become more attuned, you'll start to see this with her. But she knows when you're not being real. She knows when you're fake. So you cannot fake this stuff. You have to deal with it. It has to be dealt with properly. And so that's what we're going to dig into first. This is our first phase of the program. So how are we going to do this, guys? How? Well, first of all, we got to manage what goes in. So we're going to, from here on out, we are going to manage what goes into ourselves. Okay. Now, we're also going to have to inventory what's already in there. We're going to have to process it, sort out the mess, figure out, okay, what's serving me, what's not serving me, what am I keeping, what am I not keeping, how am I going to deal with that? Then we're going to acknowledge the pain that we have inside of us and what coping mechanisms have developed out of that pain. Then we're going to demolish those strongholds, completely get rid of them. And then we're going to understand our trauma response so that we know, we can be on guard for how we fail when we're dealing with trauma. And then we're going to embody sort of a place of steadfast serenity. Okay. Steadfast is unchanging. It's stable and reliable, certain, and serenity is like peace. And so we're going to embody that. All right. This is the lesson plan for today, and we're going to just get right to it, guys. Now, manage what goes in. How are we going to do that? Well, what are you watching? What are you reading? What are you listening to? What are you talking about? What are you surrounding yourself with? Who are you surrounding yourself with? It's like, okay, if all I do is watch, satirical comedy, I'm going to be, my humor is going to be along those lines. Okay. If all I do is watch, political shows that are complaining about, what's going on in the world politically, in our country, in our local region, I'm going to be ready to just spout those complaints wherever I go. And we all know people like this who, they're feeding themselves all this kind of garbage, these negative, negative news stories, negative TV shows. They watch all kinds of, sexualized programming on TV. And so then they're hypersexualized, fantasizing about, sexual ways to pleasure themselves. And so, these people kind of come off creepy, right? What you're putting into you, people notice it when you're around them. They know what you're up to, right? And so we got to manage that, right? Is it something that we want coming out of us? If it's not, then let's not put it in us. Okay, let's be conscious about that. What are we reading? I know a lot of women nowadays read these sort of like, graphic novels. They're like novels about, graphic sexual experiences, and it's like porn for women because it triggers their emotional centers. And so, this is just nothing but smut, right? And it programs them with all kinds of ideas about what a relationship should be, how it should be happening, how their man should be handling them, all these kinds of things. And it gives them unrealistic expectations. In the same way, what are we reading? What are we putting into our minds? And how is it programming us? What do we listen to? When I drive in the car now, guys, I don't put on, music per se, or, radio programs. I listen to audiobooks. I'm trying to feed myself things that make me grow, things that make me stronger, better, that align with the purpose that I have. Okay. And then what are we talking about? When we talk about things, it's like repeating and, emphasizing to ourselves things that we believe. So when we, the words we say carry meaning, right? And, if you're a Christian, that, creation was accomplished with words. The Lord spoke and things came into existence. And so, as many copies of God, as people who have been made in his image, when we speak, it carries weight. And we have power in our words, power to uplift or power to, hurt, power to crush, right? And so we have power to create or power to destroy. So what are we talking about? What are we repeating over and over to ourselves? And then who are we surrounding ourselves with, right? So, what do you want to be like? It is said that the core group of people that you surround yourself with are the ones that you're going to become more like, and you should choose those people. And this is something I've intentionally done in my life, chose some people, 2 or 3 guys that I want to be around and talking to more than others. All right. So this is something that you can do. So, What you put into your mind affects your thoughts affect your feelings affect your behavior, and your behavior over the short term determines your mood, and your behavior over the long term and your mood over the long term determines your personality. Okay, this is a concept that is taught in metaphysics. One of the great leading metaphysicists of our time is Joe Dispenza. If you're in the program here listening to this lesson, you'll be getting emails talking about, emails with links to Joe Dispenza recordings, because there are a lot of really good truths in some of his teachings. So Joe Dispenza talks about this, Dr. Joe Dispenza. He talks about, basically your mind, what you put in, your thoughts, they affect your feelings. Your feelings then become behavior. Behavior over the short term determines your mood, and then over the long term, that's going to become a personality. So it is absolutely critical, the things we think about and the things we feel, and those things do become who we are over the long term. Okay, so the 80-20 principle is sometimes referred to as the Pareto principle. It's a basic principle that 80% of consequences, or 80% of things that happen in our life, come from 20% of causes. And the 80-20 principle applies to many things, like, you can think of it as in terms of your home. You spend 80% of your time in 20% of your home, right? But with regard to relationships, you're going to spend probably 80% of your time at work with other humans that you work with. Now, those people are probably not going to affect you 80%. They're probably going to only affect you 20%, because the depth of the relationship isn't there. So you're going to spend roughly 20% of your time with people that affect you like 80%. Okay, and so it only takes really a couple, 2 or 3 good quality men around you to really lift you up. And what you want to do is you want to find these guys, and you want to go deep with them. You want to open up to them. You want to share with them your life, and you want to ask them about their life. And you want to make an intentional choice to really do life with these guys. That is, if you pick the right guys, and you pick guys that are aligned with where you're going and the journey you're on and what you want to become, they will absolutely have an influence, a positive influence on where you're going. And you will, 80% of the effect of relationships in your life will come from those 20% of people. Okay, so I just want to really emphasize that. Now we're going to inventory our inner self. What's already in there? Okay, what has happened to you in the past, guys? Well, some of this stuff is things that we can't control. At this point, nothing that's happened in the past can really be changed. It's happened. We need to accept it. Okay. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But right now, we're going to list out some common things that really affect people from their past. Things like childhood trauma. This is really very real, and I don't mean to belittle it in any way. I'm a victim of childhood trauma. We all are, to some degree or another. And really the key is understanding what has happened, how it's affected us, and how are we going to deal with it. Okay. Your family of origin makes a big, big difference as well in how you show up today. Past romantic relationships. For example, if in your past romantic relationship, say you never initiated the first kiss, and you've had 3 relationships in a row where you've never initiated the first kiss, it's going to be very hard for you to initiate the first kiss in the next relationship. These are just examples of how our interactions in past relationships affect our current relationships. Okay. Sexual activity history. That's really, really critical. So if you've had partners in the past before your spouse, or they have, and they approach sex in a certain way, maybe your wife is with somebody, and I've worked with guys like this who their previous partner always had to have anal sex with them, couldn't get off any other way. that's going to be a traumatic thing for them. If you're asking them for anal sex, they feel already like they aren't good enough with vaginal sex, and so you're going to be now begging them for anal sex, and they've got this past wounding. It's the same way if for example, you in the early part of your relationship, or maybe in a past relationship, you would always throw on a movie, watch a movie, and then initiate sex, and you'd always have sex, say, while you're watching a movie. What's going to happen is every time you throw on a movie, your brain is going to switch to, I want to have sex, I want to pursue sex. And if your current spouse or partner doesn't have that programming, isn't into that, maybe they want to actually just watch the show, what's going to happen is you're going to start feeling frustrated, rejected, but you need to understand what's going on and how it's affected you from your past history, okay? Emotional traumas, these are things that, have affected you emotionally. And so, a lot of people have been in relationships where they've been manipulated emotionally, where your emotions have been used to control you. And so this affects your current relationship, absolutely. If you've had financial challenges and failures and struggles in the past, for example, like now you're in a relationship where your spouse, you have money, maybe you have money, but your spouse is like always wanting to spend money on, maybe every year they want to go on a trip, or maybe they want to go out for dinner once a week. These are not bad things, but it could trigger you if you're somebody who's had past financial failures and you're really careful about how you spend money. These could be triggers for you. And so we absolutely have to be aware of these things, because sometimes we get angry at our spouse and we want to blame them. We want to blame the people in our lives for the things that they're doing or suggesting or bringing to us. But actually, a lot of times our problem with the certain circumstance is actually rooted in something that's happened to us, in some experience that we've had. And so these things are kind of like lenses that we put on, right? These experiences create a lens that we look through and that we process every new experience through, okay? And so we really do have to dig deep into this stuff to understand it, to deal with it, and to make sure that we are now aware of why we are emotionally responding in a negative way to things. We want to be aware of why things bother us, why we have, boundaries in those areas. We want to understand what's going on. We want to really craft our boundaries, and we want to really craft our life based on what we want, not on what has happened in the past and how it's affected us, okay? And so, it's really important to understand that everything that's happened to you does affect you, whether you're aware of it or not. And the more numb you are to it, the likelihood is that it's had a greater effect on you. And so what I really want to emphasize is that there are, many instances where past traumas have been so prolific, so great, that they affect the individual to the point where that individual becomes desensitized, or they even dissociate that experience, and they actually no longer remember it anymore, okay? And so some of these people actually never talk about experiences, and they may have never even told a single soul about an experience that happened to them. And so I've actually experienced this in my own life, where when I actually started digging into my inner man and my inner self, I found that there was a number of memories when I started asking my loved ones, my parents. There's a number of memories that I buried so deep that I never even remembered happened. And when I started talking with people about it, I started to learn that, hey, I remember that happening actually. Yeah. And so they were able to help me recall this. So it's really important that we really deal with this stuff, guys, because it does affect us. It's really critical. Okay. So now moving forward, we're going to process these experiences. Okay. So how do we process them? Now, guys, I want you to understand that I'm not a therapist. I'm a coach. Okay. So my focus here is on getting you results. A therapist is going to really help you dig deep into these experiences more so than I can. And there's some great therapies out there that can really, if you have serious past trauma, that can really help you get through that. So one of those therapies is EMDR. It's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Okay, and I've actually had this done to me, and it's incredible. Basically, you sit in a chair. You kind of re-immerse yourself into that past experience, and then they walk you through a process whereby then you actually come out of that experience feeling safe and feeling like that's in the past and it's not in your future. As a really brief summary, but what I would say to you is that your journey with coaching and your journey with change is going to be enriched if you supplement it with a little bit of personal therapy or digging deep into some of these more, especially if you have some more intense past trauma, like if you've been sexually abused or if you've had physical abuse or any real traumatic abuse in your past, or say if you've been adopted or things like that really tend to affect people. So my advice would be, really think about supplementing what you're already doing with some really quality therapy. Okay. Now, moving into this processing of your experiences, what I'm going to tell you is, some things that you can do to kind of address your on your own. Maybe sort of the lower severity type of experiences that you may have had. Okay, so let's start by first asking ourselves, how did we feel during this experience? Okay, identifying feelings is a really key component to understanding what happened. Okay. Because so much of our experience is tied to our feelings. And so if we just ignore our feelings and we don't understand them, we're doing ourselves a disservice. So let's understand how do we feel? Okay. Did it make us angry? Did it make us sad? Did it make us glad? Did we enjoy it? Did we hate it? What feelings did we have? And when was the first time we felt this way? So let's just say you're talking about an experience where you felt like you weren't good enough. What is the first time you felt like you weren't good enough? And usually that's the most traumatic core memory that you have. And so if you dig back to that moment and work through that experience, it's going to serve you the best, because that's a formational experience. Now, how do you feel about this experience today? Okay, what have you learned from it? What do you believe to be true about yourself and others because of this experience? And when you think about those beliefs, I really want you to dig deep into what is it that you believe, because the end product of all of our experiences is really a belief. Okay, and our experiences create emotions that create beliefs. Okay, so beliefs, do they get you more of what you want or less of what you want? Okay. And we're going to talk about outcome-based behavior in the following sessions. But what I want you to think about right now is, do these beliefs that I have, do they get me more of what I want, closer to what my goals are, or do they get me farther away? Are these beliefs serving me or not? Do they limit me in some way? Okay, or do they empower me? So this is where we could actually start to take control of what's going on inside of us by changing these beliefs about ourselves and about the world around us. Okay. And so consider what you may need to do to change the present day outcome of these experiences in your life. Okay. And so when we're thinking about this experience or any of these experiences, I want you to understand that there are limiting beliefs that we all carry. Okay. And so one of those limiting beliefs could be, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. That's a limiting belief I carried for a long time. And so when we start to have these repeating feelings like, I would never, I will always, I can't, it's impossible, I won't, those kinds of things. Those are statements that we use that are like ultimatum phrases, okay? And so when we are using these kind of ultimatum phrases, it's like a result of a belief, okay? That's how we know that we have some sort of foundational belief, usually a limiting belief, okay? That's in our subconscious or our unconscious self, okay? And so how do we combat that? We're going to dig into that as we move forward. These limiting beliefs kind of become strongholds, okay, guys? And so we'll get into dealing with these strongholds down the road, but I want to flesh this out a little bit more. So strongholds happen when we have unconscious beliefs that pre-program our behavior without our conscious choosing, okay? Now we're getting into stuff that, guys, that most men never really even think about. We're talking about self-awareness here, okay? So we're leveling up, guys. We are becoming a leveled up man, all right? And this is how we're going to increase our value, is by being self-aware, self-reflective, by really starting to think about these things. And sometimes in times like this, we can put on our little thinker hat, or we can be kind of enter into our inner Socrates, or be one of these sort of modern day thinkers that's like Jordan Peterson or whatever, who really want to examine thoughts and feelings and what's going on. So let's do that for ourselves, because it's really just going to improve who we are. So we want to look at what's happening subconsciously inside of us without our conscious choosing, okay? And it takes work to capture these behaviors as they're happening and choose a different response based on the present experience, okay? And so if we believe we're not good enough, we're not good enough, we're not good enough, we're going to gravitate towards and seek out experiences where we aren't good enough, okay? But if we get a raise at work, or we get a promotion, or we end up we have a win, how does that compute for us, right? And so we need to start capturing these beliefs that are as they're being created, and we need to capture these beliefs as we're having experiences, and really decide whether or not we're getting where we want or where we don't want, okay? And so really understand, though, that these are natural, okay? This is natural behavior. It's built into us biologically, chemically, to protect us, okay? But at the same time, we aren't, like you could think about back in, times of hunter-gatherer societies, where, the man was out, with his spear, and he's hunting for a rabbit, and he comes around the corner, and there's like a cougar or something there, a lion, and instantly he's in a different brain state, right? This is a fight, flight, or freeze. This is an immediate traumatic brain state where we have to choose, okay, what are we going to do? And so those kinds of experiences, we don't necessarily have them nowadays, okay? But we all have those sort of moments of fear or triggers that throw us into that same sort of brain state, okay? And what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to capture that moment and say, is there a lion here today that's going to attack me? Is there a real danger in this? Is this going to actually serve me, or is it not? And that's how we start to really take control. So we need to recognize that these limiting beliefs actually limit us, okay? They're not serving us today. So, moving on from that, we want to understand that not just limiting us, but these can actually create patterns of damaging behavior, okay? And so what happens is we want to escape this state of mind where we're in kind of like this fight, flight, or freeze, okay? We want to escape it. So how do we escape that frame of mind? Well, we might find something like a bottle of beer. We might have a couple beers and it might just help us relax. Or we might smoke a joint. Or, we might take a walk out in the fresh air and breathe oxygen. There's different ways to kind of bring ourselves back. But I want you to understand that a lot of people tend to develop repeating patterns of damaging behavior. And these are things we call addiction, okay? And these patterns foster denial, because really what we say to ourselves is, I need this. I have to have this to survive. It's the only way I can cope and get through this and move forward. And so we deny that there's a problem, and we serve that escape mechanism with anything that we can to keep it perpetuating. All right. And so now I want to talk about denial, guys, because I really want you to be able to understand how this looks so that you can find it in your own life and eradicate it. All right. There is simple denial, saying, look, the problem doesn't exist. There's minimizing, which is, when we say, well, that's not really a great thing, but it's not a big deal. It's really not a big deal. We can actually we can manage it, Or we rationalize, we say, well, it's okay because, blah, blah, blah. We have some excuse or another why we're going to rationalize it. And then there's blaming, right? So we have blaming, which is, where we project responsibility onto someone or something else for the actual bad behavior. Or we have spiritualizing. So what happens with spiritualizing denial is that we use, religious manipulation, essentially, to rationalize. And so some people, there's a verse, Philippians 3:13, that says, this one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead, I press on towards the goal for the prize. Now that's great in the context within which it was written by Paul the Apostle. However, when we start saying, well, I'm going to forget about what happened in the past, I'm going to push forward with, where I believe God has called me, that's kind of irresponsible. It's not actually addressing the problem. So when we can twist scripture and we twist, spiritual principles to serve our addiction or our bad behavior, that's wrong, okay? Diversion is another form of denial. Whenever somebody brings up the problem, we just make a joke and we laugh, or we change subjects. We put the attention onto something else. Those things are forms of diversion, right? Even saying wishful things like, if only this, or if only something in the past would have been different, or if only something in the future. That's a version of denial. It's not addressing what needs to be addressed today, okay? Victimizing is, settling and embracing the disease, right? It's saying, well, I guess this is my lot. This is where I am at. There's nothing I can do about it. She's a bitch. She's crazy. And so fuck it. I'm just going to be a victim. Well, that's also denial, right? You're not dealing with the problem. Hostility. This is what the angry man does. He issues threats. He bullies. He's angry. He's violent. These things also are meant to distract from the problem. So denial, what it does in every circumstance, is it robs your emotions of their power for your good. Okay, and so it sort of takes away your ability to respond to the situation. And so when we accept our failures, we have an emotional response that drives us forward to a new belief, okay? But when we deny our problems, it robs those emotions of their power. I hope that makes sense, okay? So we really need to flesh out any forms of denial that are in our life and eradicate them. It's a big part of your inner work, guys. Now, trauma responses. We talked a little bit about this, but that state of mind that comes about when you're faced with a threat, it creates fight, flight, or freeze, okay? And so trauma is actually defined now as anything that causes a fight, flight, or freeze response, okay? So there's, I think, a lot to be said about big T trauma versus small T trauma. A lot of people talk about trauma very liberally, and when sometimes the things that they're talking about really did not affect them or create a core memory or a foundational belief or a limiting belief. So I'm not overemphasizing that we all dig into, every little thing. But what I want you to really understand is that if you're having trouble figuring out how you've been affected by your past experiences, think about times when you fought something, think about times when you ran away from something, and think about times when you just froze and did not know what to do, okay? So, and understanding the patterns of what you go to over and over in certain circumstances, and that understanding can actually help you to stop the process in the future. So I'm going to give you an example from my own life. My first wife, she would get very angry about some things. She had a real struggle sometimes controlling her emotions, and so as most women do, and so she would come at me with that look in her eye, right? And she'd start attacking me verbally. And so I, being like the mama's boy and not, having the confidence or the self-awareness to understand and to deal with this, I didn't know how to take leadership in that moment. So what I would do is I would freeze. I wouldn't fight, I wouldn't run, I would freeze. And I would just let her rail against me, and then I would wait for it to pass. And then afterwards, I could think of all kinds of wonderful things that I could have said, but in the moment, I was crippled by this freeze. And so once I started to understand this, and I started to be able to prepare for it, I was able to recognize it happening and realize that, look, I'm not as threatened as I thought I was. What she needs to do is she needs to express to me what's bothering her. And I needed to be able to hear it and validate it. And so instead of freezing, I was able to then start to respond intelligently. But it started with my understanding of how did I react when faced with something that my brain perceived as a threat. Okay? And that's what I really want you to understand, is that it's not always a threat just because your brain perceives it that way. We have these built-in systems that are meant to protect us. And sometimes we have these trauma responses based on what our brain is telling us at a reptilian level, at a brainstem level. But the higher thinking brain, our prefrontal cortex, is capable of taking control of that situation and then changing the outcome by giving us tools and behaviors to respond in a way that takes away the threat, okay? And so that's what I want you to do. I want you to understand, what is it that your reptilian brain, what is it that brain, when it's faced with a threat, what is it that it does? Does it fight? Does it run? Does it freeze? Once you know that, then you can start to manage it, okay? So understand what your response is and manage it. Now, demolishing strongholds. First of all, we have to understand, okay? And I've written understand here a few times because it's really important that we understand. We have to be self-reflective here, self-aware, really think about this stuff. What happened to you? Right? Understand that it was something that happened to you. Understand that it was in the past. okay? And understand that you are now safe because you are now in the present and you are separated from that threat, from that experience, from that trauma. You're separated from it by time, okay? And it's actually not even possible for you to enter back into that same circumstance again, okay? So you are safe. And then once you understand that, and this is, by the way, what happens with EMDR. Now you're able to forgive those people who hurt you, right? These people who hurt you, maybe they don't deserve forgiveness. You might say, you know, they're a horrible person. They did horrible things. They haven't, you know, acknowledged their wrong. They haven't apologized. They haven't tried to make it right. There's no, you know, reconciliation possible. This person does not deserve my forgiveness. What I want to say to you is that forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, okay? When you forgive somebody else, it actually releases you. And so we can talk about that more in future sessions. But what I want you to understand is that forgiveness is mandatory. You have to forgive those who hurt you. If you cannot forgive them, you will not be able to move forward from this experience, and it will continue to affect you on a subconscious level. So forgiveness is critical, okay? We're going to talk more about how to do that in some of the future lessons, but forgive those who hurt you. Forgive yourself for being too weak to respond better, right? Understand that you were doing the best you could with the information and the skills that you had at the time. You have to be merciful with your younger self, okay? So forgive yourself for all the damage it's done in your life since. Forgive yourself for being too weak. Forgive yourself for not knowing what to do at the time. Forgive yourself. Be kind to yourself. Remember, the most important relationship you have is the relationship with yourself. And so forgiving yourself is absolutely critical to being able to move forward from past traumas and from strongholds that are affecting you in your life, and creating subconscious beliefs and subconscious responses and behaviors, okay? Now, we want to identify the unconscious and limiting beliefs that this has caused in our life, okay? So if it's like my example, if it's feeling unworthy, we want to identify that. I felt like I was unworthy, okay? And then we want to discard that. We want to consciously discard that because it's not serving us anymore. And we want to replace it with a new belief that's going to empower and serve us. And usually replacing it means, you know, contemplating the opposite or some opposing belief that serves us. Okay, so for me, it's like I am worthy. I have value. Okay. And so, you know, if you're weak and you say, oh, I feel weak and pathetic, no, I'm strong and confident. You know, those are ways that you can change that belief. So you replace those beliefs with new empowering beliefs that serve you. And then you repeat these new beliefs to yourself using affirmations until you've created a new unconscious belief that creates positive automatic responses. Okay. And so if I felt like I was a pathetic weakling and I was beat up as a kid on the schoolyard and I was always beat down and I was never picked for the sports teams and I sucked at everything that I tried, and I felt like I was just weak and pathetic, I could actually change that by telling myself over and over again that, you know what, I'm a strong, confident man. I have everything that I need within me to be successful, to be prosperous. I am a strong, capable, confident man. And if you tell yourself that every morning, every night, you create a routine, you know, that's going to be really, really transformative, that kind of a routine. But not only that, if you can actually go a step further where you now catch yourself when you start thinking the weak and pathetic thoughts, if you can actually identify those as they come along, you train your mind to be this self-aware, that you can grab those thoughts out of the air while they're coming at you and then change them. No, I am not weak and pathetic. I am strong and confident. That is going to accelerate your process of change. Okay. And so this is going to play out in your relationships massively, because when your spouse or your partner comes to you and says something that triggers one of your unconscious beliefs, like say she says, oh, that's you should call the neighbor boy to come help you move that table, because she may not even say to you that it's too heavy for you. But now you're assuming all these things. I'm weak, I'm pathetic, I can't move the table. My wife thinks I'm weak and pathetic. She's not attracted to me. She thinks I have flabby breasts or something, and my body isn't attractive to her, whatever. You could think about all these negative things, and you could tell yourself all these stories based on these negative beliefs. Or you could catch yourself in the moment and say, you know what? That's a limiting belief that I have. It has nothing to do with what she's saying. She probably is genuinely concerned about me, doesn't want me to hurt my back trying to move a table by myself. And she's actually suggesting something that's responsible. Let's get another person in here so that we don't damage the table, damage the furniture, the walls, whatever. So you can actually start to take control of these things and create new beliefs. And now the next time she comes at you and suggests you get some help with something, you'll be less likely to go to that limiting belief and more likely to fall back on your empowering belief, like I am a strong, confident man. I'm not afraid to ask for help. I know when I need help, or when help will benefit me. Okay. And so as you go through this process, be patient with yourself. You're going to fail. There are going to be times when that limiting belief is going to come flooding back. You're going to be filled with anxiety. You're going to be filled with anger. You're going to be filled with all these kinds of things. And you're going to have to make apologies, and you're going to have to work at this. It's a process, but I don't want you to give up. Okay. Because perseverance is what's going to create success for you in the long term. Okay. And so we're going to continue to talk about this as we move forward. But now I want to move on to these motivations. What motivates us to demolish these strongholds? What motivates us to keep going on this journey? What motivates us day to day? And I like to talk of it as candy and spankings. Okay. So every one of us is motivated by candy and spankings. Now this is really pain and pleasure, that kind of a thing. Can be talked about in a number of different ways, but you could even break it down to, dopamine and cortisol, right? The chemicals that are created from stress and chemicals that are created from pleasure, dopamine and cortisol, pain, pleasure, candy, spankings. Okay. We always are, as human beings, naturally trying to move away from pain and towards pleasure. It's sort of like how we're made. Okay. And humans are capable of using pleasure to numb pain. All right. And so what tends to happen is that, we can get stuck in these patterns of escape behavior that cause numbing of pain, but actually it also numbs pleasure. Okay. And so there's a song by the Eagles about this. It's called Desperado. Why don't you come to your senses? You've been out riding fences for so long. It goes on. It talks about, you're losing all your highs and lows. Ain't it funny how the feeling goes away? When we try to escape pain, we also numb our ability to feel good and bad. Okay. And not only that, but we can get stuck in this cycle of addiction where now we're addicted to the pain, right? So I've actually experienced people who are addicted to stress and drama in their life, to where if they don't have it, they are subconsciously creating it so that they can feel normal. They are so used to having cortisol coursing through their veins that when the cortisol subsides, they literally pick a fight to create more cortisol. Now, if that's you, I feel very sorry for your spouse. You really need to get control of that, brother. So let's dig into this stuff and really start to ask ourselves, is this something that is happening within me? And to what extent? Where am I at on the scale? Every one of us has a go-to behavior that we typically use to numb our pain and to create pleasure. Okay, now this can be called a drug of choice. On the scale, we're all addicted to something. All right, and you may be mildly on a scale of addiction or extremely on a scale of addiction. Some people are much more able to control themselves than others. And some people are and there's no shame in it. We're all human. This is a human condition, okay? So we need to acknowledge the weakness that we have so that we can deal with it, all right? These kinds of addicted programs are extremely difficult to undo, especially in circumstances where you're addicted to things that have affected your brain chemistry, to like cocaine, pornography, cigarettes. These are some of the hardest things to quit. Okay, so I want you to understand that I'm not an addictions therapist. I have struggled and overcome with my own addictions battles. And I was married to a person who struggled with addictions significantly. And so I have a deep understanding of this, and I have been through several programs to educate me on this. And I know that we all, on a scale, have an addiction of some sort. We have a drug of choice. And I want us in this program as men to take responsibility and acknowledge what that is for each of us, so that we can have greater control over ourselves and a greater impact on the world around us, okay? This is impactful masculinity we're talking about here. So just got a few facts here for you guys so that if you're still in denial, if you're still struggling with denial and you don't think that you're part of this group, I want you to read some of these facts. 50% of Americans aged 12 and over have used illicit drugs at least once. 21% have used illicit drugs in the last year. 80% of Americans admit to using alcohol at least once in their lifetime. 64% of males, and I want to state that just because you use alcohol doesn't mean you're addicted. I understand that. But 80% of us have used it, and it is a highly addictive substance, okay? 64% of males and 61% of females admit to using alcohol in the past year. 24% of males and 19% of females admit to binge drinking in the past month. In the past month, that's almost a quarter of all men in America. Okay. 10% of Americans aged 12 and over had diagnosed alcohol use disorder in 2023. Okay. 58% of American adults say they have a habit of watching porn as of October 2022. 58%, guys. Okay. And maybe you'll argue that there's nothing wrong with porn. We'll get to that in a minute. It's an addiction. Okay. And it absolutely affects us. 6 to 8% of the American population is classified as addicted to sex. 6 to 8. 10% of Americans are addicted to social media. 13% of Americans show signs of food addiction. 48% of Americans claim to be workaholics. And 6% are legitimate shopaholics. Okay. So if you've managed to escape all these things, there's other addictions that I haven't listed and I haven't researched the percentages. But if you've managed to escape all these things, you're like a unicorn. I want to capture and study you. Please send me an email later, because you're amazing, all right? And probably you're not real. Let's just be honest. Addiction is a real and serious problem, and it will hurt your relationships, okay? Examples of addiction: alcohol, drugs, prescription and narcotic. Smoking. This is an addiction, and I have seen it destroy more marriages than you would believe. It is amazing what happens when one person smokes and the other person does not. Do not underestimate this, guys. If you're a smoker, let me tell you that you can't even begin to smell what that smells like to your spouse who is not a smoker. You don't understand because you're desensitized to it. Okay. And this is coming from a guy, I was a smoker. So I'm not the pot calling the kettle black here. I'm saying, hey, I am the pot call. I am the pot here. I have smoked. Okay. I know what it's like. Um, I'm not talking from a high horse. That's what I'm trying to say. Sexual arousal and similar addictions, emotional arousal. And I say arousal because some of us maybe aren't addicted to the sex, but we're addicted to the arousal. And so that's where you see people having all these sort of online texting relationships that are totally inappropriate and are not fair and respectful to their spouse. But that's because they're addicted to the arousal. Okay. Spending addictions, shopping addictions, social media, TV, screens, attention. Maybe you're just addicted to attention. You can't go 5 minutes in peace and quiet on your own. You have to have somebody talking to you, be around somebody. You usually drive everybody around you completely nuts. Stress. Like I said earlier, some people are actually addicted to cortisol and stress. And maybe you're addicted to work. Maybe it's food. Maybe it's something else. But you get the point. Now I want to talk about porn, guys. 69% of American men, 69% watch porn. 12% of all websites on the internet. That's mind-blowing. 12% of all websites are porn websites. 73% of teens have watch porn, okay? And their average first exposure is 12 years, okay? 12 years old. 56% of divorces involve one party having an obsessive interest in pornographic websites. Quote. 56%. So that means that if you're on here working through this program and you are facing separation or divorce or the end of your relationship, the chances are that there's a 50-50 chance that it's because of porn use, or porn use has a great effect on why you're here. Okay. So please do not be in denial about this. Porn impairs your ability to think natural, healthy thoughts about your spouse and your family. And it reprograms your brain to have an unnatural and unrealistic belief about sex. Your sexual expectations actually change. This is scientifically proven with research. It is not a made-up fact. Okay. A lot of these stats I got from Covenant Eyes. Covenant Eyes has done a great amount of research. They're a great resource. You should really look them up. Porn impairs sexual arousal with real human beings. Okay. So when there are actually men out there who cannot have sex with their wives unless they have porn on their phone beside the bed or a pornographic magazine, it's actually sick. Okay. It increases erectile dysfunction and difficulties in intimate relationships. A lot of people can't get it up, keep it up, unless they're looking at porn because they're so conditioned to that's how it works for them. Porn has the same effect on the brain as cocaine. It destroys your prefrontal cortex. It completely rewires your brain, creates all these neural pathways, and you have to actually rewrite that to get off of porn addiction. Now, I'm not saying this as somebody on my high horse. I'm saying this as a man who I was addicted to porn for many years. I have not looked at porn for 6 years now, and I'm recording this in 2024. And I will tell you that it is the most amazing thing to be free of that. It absolutely affected me way more than I ever thought it would. So I will tell you unequivocally, porn is bad. Bad for you. It's bad for your intimate relationship. It's just bad. It destroys trust within the marriage. Okay. Now, let's talk about victory. How do we get victory? First of all, we want to break the cycle of shame. I don't want you guys to be ashamed, and I want you to understand that being ashamed is going to get you farther away from where you want to go. Okay. It is not going to serve you. So stop beating yourself up and start being merciful to yourself. Understand what motivates you and leads you towards your drug of choice. Avoid those circumstances. Okay, I can tell you that from my own experience and the experiences of many guys I work with, controlling your behaviors is 90% about controlling your circumstances. Okay, don't allow yourself to get into a circumstance where that behavior becomes easy. Accept that relapses are a part of recovery. These things are going to happen. Don't beat yourself up about it. Move on right away. One thing I firmly believe is that if, say for example, if you're an alcoholic and you quit drinking and you've quit drinking for 3 months and you've had 3 months of sobriety and you fall off the wagon for one day, you have not lost that 3 months. You have 3 months of sobriety. Maybe it's only been one day since you drank, but you are working on your fourth month of sobriety. And so I want you to understand that no matter what your drug of choice is, you don't lose sobriety if you have a relapse. Okay, don't beat yourself up. Break the cycle of shame. And authentic accountability, this is absolutely critical. You want to be, again, it's like the 80-20 principle. You want to surround yourself with a couple of people, 2 or 3, that have already had a similar victory. Okay, now I strongly suggest these are men. You don't want to be in this kind of intimate type of conversation with, for any addiction, where you're being this authentic with somebody that's the opposite sex and they're not your spouse. Okay, so please pick 2 or 3 men, because a cord of 3 strands is better than 2, and a cord of 2 strands is better than 1, right? So we want to have guys that are already ahead of us on the journey that help us move forward and have this victory. Then we're going to replace this drug of choice with a healthier, less damaging alternative. So the drug of choice, what it does, guys, is it creates dopamine in us. It creates a chemical that stimulates the pleasure centers of the brain. So how can we stimulate those pleasure centers of the brain and create that same chemical doing healthy things that aren't damaging? Things like working out, reading, walking, etc. It's really, really important to find a replacement. Okay, and then we're going to define a new identity for ourselves. This is so critical to overcoming addiction. By asking yourself the question, guys, is this who you are? Are you someone who continually engages in this negative behavior? Or are you someone who does not and who does something different? And so we want to pick a vision for our future, define a vision for our future based on the outcome that we want, okay? And so ask yourself, what motivates you more than the pain? So when I quit smoking, what I did was I defined myself, look, I am not a smoker. I am a non-smoker. I'm a non-smoker who has smoked for a while, and it's been a bad choice and I shouldn't have done it, but I'm not going to beat myself up about it now because I'm not a smoker. I'm a non-smoker, and I'm going to I don't need cigarettes because I'm not a smoker. And so I changed my identity of who I was, and then I defined a vision of my future. So do I want to be a 60-year-old guy who, is out of breath, hacking and wheezing, struggling to play with my grandkids and chase them around the park and push them on the swing and, all these kinds of things? Or do I want to be the kind of grandpa who has vitality, who can catch my own breath? Do I want to be a grandpa someday who, can kick a soccer ball around with my grandson or my granddaughter and not be out of breath and actually have fun? Do I want to be a grandfather who's actually around for my grandkids and not having strokes because I've destroyed my arteries and my veins with cigarettes? So instead of defining myself as a smoker, I defined myself as a non-smoker, and then I defined my future with a vision of what I wanted, which was to be that healthy grandpa, to be there for my family in the future. And so defining yourself a vision for your future is going to actually serve you in overcoming this drug of choice. If you cannot achieve swift victory using these techniques and methods that I've shared today, I want you to seek professional help, because you can go through my entire program and you can work on all these other things. But if you're going to continue to be in a damaging cycle of behavior, if that's your problem and it's affecting your marriage, you need to be, first of all, out of denial and deal with that. And secondly, you need to accept that wasting your life is not going to serve you and it will not help anyone. Every moment, every day, every month, every year that goes on while you're in that cycle is wasted, okay? You are literally developmentally frozen in that place, and nothing's going to change until you can break free of it. So if you can't do it on your own with accountability and with these techniques that I'm suggesting, please get professional help. Check yourself into treatment if you need to. Deal with it, okay? Now, we're going to talk about how do we embody steadfast serenity, okay? And I'm going to give you the tool, one of the main tools that I want you to use throughout the rest of your life. This tool is going to it's going to be something that you can fall back on at any moment, okay? And so this entire lesson, and a lot of the lessons I'm going to teach you, you're not going to remember word for word. You're not going to remember all the specific points and stuff like that. And especially when you're in a moment of trauma or potential trauma, when you're threatened and your wife is angry, or there's something happening in your life that's creating stress or could lead to fight, flight, or freeze. In that moment, you need to have a picture in your mind that you can go to that's going to summarize the depth of your knowledge and understanding on this subject, so that you can then act out in a way that gets you where you want to go and not where you don't want to go. And so that's why I want to introduce to you the lighthouse, okay? This lighthouse is a product of a rock solid inner game. You are the lighthouse. You are grounded on the rock. You do not move. You are not affected. Storms come, winds and waves. These are the influences or criticisms of people in your life. Your spouse or your kids, they might get angry at you. It might seem like you're in the middle of a storm, but you're the lighthouse. You're on the rock. You do not move. You do not lash out to them. You are the lighthouse. All you do is you shine light back. You shine love back. You are steadfast and movable, consistent, reliable, and you are safe. Just like the lighthouse creates safety for all around it, you create safety for those loved ones in your life by being the lighthouse, okay? And so what you can do is you can practice this in your mind. What is the lighthouse? And repeat it to yourself. And when you're in these kind of situations that could cause trauma or stress, or that could trigger you to fall back onto some unconscious limiting belief, what you bring to mind immediately is the picture of the lighthouse, and it's going to remind you, flood back in all these things into your conscious, and you're going to go, wait a minute, I'm the lighthouse. I don't move. I don't lash back. I don't yell. I shine love. I am steadfast. I'm immovable. I'm safe. I'm consistent. So I want you to really embody the lighthouse that is steadfast serenity. Now, this Matthew 27-24, if you're following along in Scripture, this is a reference from Scripture that talks about this concept. I'm going to read it to you. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. Now, these are the words of Jesus, okay? And I want you to really understand that you You can be a lighthouse and you can found your life on the rock, or you can be a fool and you can be tossed around by the wind and the waves. You can try to fight against it, but you're going to look like the guy trying to mop up the ocean as the waves are coming in. It's just foolish, and great will be your fall. So how do you want your household to exist? How do you want your life to move forward? Be the lighthouse. Thanks so much, guys, for staying to the end, and I'll see you on the next one.